Hey, so a couple people have asked, and I decided today to teach you how to draw an eye and the nose area. So just the upper half of the face. We're not going into the mouth or the jaw or hair at all. We're just going to learn the basics. So today I used a mechanical pencil, although a 2B does work as well. It gives you a little bit more range. It's basically the same as a yellow pencil, but the yellow one just doesn't get as dark, and it's harder to erase if you go too dark on accident. So the basic eye shape is like two U's stacked on top of each other, and I'll show you that in a second. If you draw a wide U and then another one on top of it, it's the basic shape of your eye. Make sure that you have that little pocket in the left-hand corner. That's your tear duct. You don't want to forget about it. It's pretty important. And then you can see I did a line underneath the eye. That's just the basic shape of the underline, the underline of the eye. It's just to help you get an idea of the shape of it. It's exaggerated, so if you're drawing it, just make sure that it's not super exaggerated. For the pupil, I have my highlight already drawn in. That's the first thing that I do. And I make sure that it's the brightest part of the iris. And I'm outlining the iris so that it's just as dark as the pupil. It's pretty important that it is because it just adds a lot of depth and makes it look more realistic. So you have to define your light source when you're drawing an eye. That should be the first thing that you do when you start shading. Right across from your highlight, so the highlight is on the upper right-hand corner. So the lower left-hand corner of my iris is going to be the brightest part of my eye. I'm going to fade it out from the pupil to the middle area of the eye, and that's just going to make sure that there's no abrupt changes in my shading, because when you do have an abrupt change, it does not look realistic and looks cartoony. Same thing with the outline of the pupil. You want to make sure that you fade it in a little bit so that it's not super abrupt change. You want to make sure that it's gradual and that it looks smooth. So if you wanted to add those lines, if you ever looked at someone's eye really closely, you could tell that there are little lines that go from the outside of your your iris to the outside of your pupil. So if you're doing that, just make sure that they're pretty light, because you're not exactly able to see them clearly, but they are there, and it looks much better with them than without them. So make sure that you add them in there. And as for the shading of the white part of the eye, I just made sure that across, to the left of the eye, that's across from the light source, that's darker than the right side. I also added a shadow underneath the eyelid, because that also cuts off some of the light. It casts a shadow on the eye. So I hid a little line, and then I added it in with my blending stump, because the blending stump carries lead. I used the blending stump to blend out the eye because my paper was pretty grainy, and I wanted to make sure that everything looked nice and smooth, because that's how an eye looks. It's very glossy and smooth. So on the eyelid, above the crease, I've kind of made a little line you could see, and that's where it starts getting darker. It's the shadow line, because that's one of the techniques of drawing. You can, it's called shadow lining, where you mark where your shadows are and then you shade them in like that. It's really, really good for beginners, especially because it's hard to envision where the light cuts off. So if you line them out in the beginning, then you can plan it out a little bit more. The crease of the eye should follow the eyelid. It doesn't really have to be exact, but it should be close, because that helps add a little interest to the drawing. The eyebrow should be one eye height above the eye. So if your eye is 1 inch, then the eyebrow should be 1 inch over your eye, if that makes sense. Closer to the left-hand side of your eyebrow, the hairs are going to be going more up. And then as you get closer to the right-hand side, the mid area, it's going to be up and a little to the right. So it's kind of curving a little bit. And then as you get closer to the right-hand corner, the edge, it's going to taper off, and it's going to go closer to downwards. So you could see that I left the tear duct a little bit whiter than the rest of the skin around it, because the tear duct actually bulges out of your skin a little bit. It depends on the person, but some people's bulge out more than others. I left mine pretty exaggerated just so that you could see exactly what I'm doing. The bags, so like next to the tear duct of the under eye, it should be darker because that's where the light is cut off. You can see like the light source. I made sure to leave space for the waterline. That's the space between your actual eye and your under eye. So just make sure that you leave that because it's important. And you're not having any rough transitions between any of the shading at all. You want to make sure that everything looks super smooth and gradual changes with the graphite. So you're like, if you need practice with it, then just practice shading, practice having it start dark, and then without lifting your pencil, lighten it up and move over to the right. Or if you're left-handed, moving over to the left, starting dark and getting lighter. So the positioning of the eye, I figured that out by measuring from the corner of the eye, so the tear duct, to the other corner of my eye, the one across from the tear duct. So your eyes are one eye apart. So like if the eye measured 1 inch in width, then you want to make sure that the eyes are 1 inch apart, and the other eye is also 1 inch. So the total is 3 inches, and they are 1 inch apart. If that makes any sense, if you get what I'm going for, then great. If not, it's okay. Just practice a little bit. You'll see what I mean. Now I'm drawing the nose. I kind of just picked a random spot for it, but I made sure that the nose bridge is in the middle between the eyes, and that the nose is it's centered. So like the ball point of the nose, it doesn't really matter how low it goes, but I drew a little triangle so that you can kind of get a reference of how low it should be, because it can't be super high and it can't be like super low, and there's really no perfect way of telling how like low your nose goes, because everyone has different nose length. Some people have really long nose, some people have really short nose. It also matters, like if your nose is upturned, then you can see your nostrils if your person is looking straight at you. And if it's not, then you won't be able to see their nostrils if they're looking straight at you, because it determines the tip of your nose, like the positioning of the tip of your nose. It also matters if you're viewing a person on an angle, but we're going to go into that later. So you're shading in right here. I'm just using my blending stump to blend out all the shading that I did with my pencil just there. I made sure to make the right or the left-hand side of my nose darker because the light source is coming from the right. I lightened up my nose a little bit because I didn't like how dark it was looking. And I'm just blending things out and making sure that it all looks very smooth. And I'm using the right end of my blending stump because the way that I do it is I have one end of my blending stump dedicated for blending dark areas of skin or just graphite, I guess. And then the other end of my blending stump is for blending light areas, because the blending stump carries the graphite, and you could like make lines with just a blending stump, like kind of like a pencil, and they're kind of hard to erase. So I like going and just making sure that the blending stump has its dedicated side. For the eyebrow, I'm doing the same thing that I did with the other one, little more careless actually, because I didn't want to spend super long on it. And just make sure that you have, like, you can pencil in the shape of your eyebrow. I wasn't too happy with it because they are looking a little uneven, but based on your person, they can be super thin, they could be super thick, and if you're using makeup, they could actually just be drawn on. But I decided to show you how to do it naturally. So you want to have like a variation of darkness for your eyebrow hairs. So like you want the base to be super light, like your entire sketch should be super light. And then as you get more confident with it, then you can darken it up with like different values of pencils. Maybe go in there with like a 4B or a 6B or even an 8B if you really want to be dramatic. But then the other eye, I'm doing the same thing as I did with the right eye, just making sure that I have the lower left-hand corner of my iris be lighter than the rest of it, because I think that it reflects the highlight. And then between your eye and the white part of your eye, like your iris and the white part of your eye, there should be a thin white line that a lot of beginners miss. Just make sure that it's there. It's pretty important. I don't really know what it is, but it's just there in almost everyone's eye. I'm just making sure that the crease is almost as dark as my pupil because yeah, it adds a lot of depth if it is. And people have different like crease darknesses. Like some people have really dark creases, some people have less deep set eyes, so they're not going to be so dark. But it all depends on the person. So it's really like flexible and based on just your imagination for this one, because I drew this person from my head. This is not an actual person, but you can see that just having a slight alteration of any of your sketch and it will make a huge difference in the person and their overall look. Like my person kind of looks sad, and you can see I did a little sad face there because I made their eyelids go kind of triangular, and based on the placement of their pupils, it just it makes them look sad because it's cut off in a way that conveys that emotion. So I'm drawing the eyelashes now. You could see that I did one eyelash on the right hand side being like going towards the right, and then one in the middle going up, and then one on the left going to the left. It just helps me position them because I'm not really good at eyelashes, but I decided that I almost forgot to draw them here, so it's kind of like a last minute thing, but they don't have to be all in the same place. They're kind of all over the place. So yeah, that's basically it. That's just the basics. And if you need anything else, just feel free to ask. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you feel like it.